Welcome to another deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're going to explore something truly mind-boggling,
Oh.
the human genome.
All right.
You've probably heard the phrase, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah.
We're going to unpack this complex topic together.
Yeah.
And to make it easier to grasp, we're using an analogy that you'll love.
I love
The
analogy.
genome as a book.
It's a fantastic way to visualize it.
Okay.
Instead of intimidating scientific jargon, we're dealing with a library of stories.
Okay, let's break it down.
Okay.
This book of life has 23 chapters, which represent our chromosomes.
Okay.
Each chapter contains thousands of stories, and those are your genes.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
The stories themselves are structured in a unique way.
Each gene story is made up of paragraphs called exons,
Okay.
but these paragraphs are interrupted by sections that don't actually code for anything.
Oh.
The introns.
Introns.
Imagine reading a thrilling novel where every other paragraph is an advertisement. That's what introns are like.
So those introns are like genetic pop-up ads, and scientists are still trying to figure out why they exist.
Yeah, it's a mystery.
But getting back to the structure,
Okay.
what about the words and letters that make up these genetic stories?
Think of codons as the words, and each codon is made up of letters.
Okay.
The bases A, T, C, and G.
Got it.
These bases are the fundamental building blocks of DNA, the language of life.
Well, hold on. Let me do some quick math here.
Okay.
If each gene is a story, and we have thousands of genes,
Right.
that means this book must be massive.
It is.
Wow.
We're talking about a book with 1 billion words.
1 billion words.
That's longer than 5,000 average-sized novels
Wow.
or 800 Bibles.
That's incredible.
And to think all this information is packed into a microscopic cell nucleus,
It's mind-blowing.
it is mind-blowing.
That's like fitting the entire Library of Congress into something smaller than a pinhead.
It is incredible.
Okay, now I really need to know how this information gets translated. We've got the blueprint, but how do we get from DNA to a living, breathing human being?
That's where RNA comes in.
RNA.
It acts like a messenger carrying the genetic instructions from DNA to the ribosomes,
Okay,
where proteins are made.
got it.
Proteins are the workhorses of the cell, carrying out all sorts of functions that make life possible.
So DNA is the blueprint, RNA is the contractor,
Correct.
and proteins are the construction workers.
A perfect analogy.
Okay, I like
But
it.
here's a fascinating twist.
Yeah.
RNA might actually be older than DNA.
What?
A relic from a time when it was the primary carrier of genetic information.
Wow.
This RNA world hypothesis
RNA world.
suggests that RNA was the original molecule of life.
Wow, that changes everything.
It does.
So RNA isn't just a messenger, it might be the ancestor of both DNA and proteins. That's like discovering your great-grandmother was a pioneering scientist.
And there's compelling evidence for this RNA world idea.
Okay, like what?
For example, the building blocks of DNA are actually made by modifying RNA components.
Interesting.
It's like finding ancient tools that were used to build the very foundation of life.
Okay, this is getting really deep.
It is fascinating.
But before we get lost in the RNA world, let's bring it back to the book of life.
All right,
What kind of stories are hidden within this genetic library?
think about it. The origins of life itself,
Yeah.
the evolution of humans, the genetic basis of behavior, and even the ethical dilemmas of genetic engineering.
Wow.
These narratives are all woven into the fabric of our DNA.
So, in this deep dive, we're going to try to understand these complex topics without getting bogged down in technical terms.
Right.
We're going to explore the human genome chapter by chapter,
Okay.
relating these genetic stories back to you and your life.
Sounds good.
Let's start by flipping to chromosome 3.
Okay. Chromosome 3.
One of the most intriguing genes on this chromosome is responsible for a condition called alkaptonuria.
Alkaptonuria.
Alkap what now?
It's a mouthful.
That definitely doesn't roll off the tongue. What's the story behind this gene?
Alkaptonuria is a rare genetic disorder.
Oh.
And one of its most noticeable symptoms is that it causes urine to turn black when exposed to air.
Black urine.
Yes, black urine.
Okay, that's definitely something you wouldn't forget.
No, you wouldn't.
But what causes this strange phenomena?
It's caused by a mutation in a gene that produces a specific enzyme.
Mm-hmm.
When this enzyme is faulty, it can't break down a compound called homogentisate.
Okay.
which builds up in the body and gets excreted in the urine.
So it's like a tiny typo in the genetic code.
Exactly.
But it leads to a pretty dramatic and visible change.
Precisely.
Wow.
And while acaptonuria is a relatively harmless condition,
Okay.
this gene on chromosome 3 was actually one of the first examples of how genes directly relate to specific traits.
Interesting.
There's a landmark discovery that helped pave the way for our understanding of genetics.
So this black urine gene was a key piece of the puzzle, helping scientists connect the dots between our genes and our physical characteristics.
Exactly. And this discovery opened up a whole new world of understanding about how genes function and how mutations can lead to a wide range of outcomes, both harmless and harmful.
Speaking of harmful outcomes, let's move on to chromosome 4.
Okay, chromosome 4.
And a gene that's sadly known for causing a much more serious condition, Huntington's disease.
Huntington's disease is a heartbreaking story.
Yeah.
It's a neurodegenerative disorder that causes progressive damage to brain cells,
Wow.
leading to movement, cognitive, and psychiatric problems.
That's terrible.
And what makes it even more tragic is that symptoms often don't appear until adulthood,
Oh, wow.
after a person may have already started a family and passed the gene on to their children.
And this devastating disease is caused by a single gene.
It is caused by a single gene.
That seems almost impossible.
And what's particularly challenging is that it's a dominant gene.
Dominant gene.
This means that inheriting just one copy of the faulty gene from either parent is enough to cause the disease.
So unlike alkaptonuria, where you need 2 copies of the mutated gene with Huntington's, you're basically guaranteed to develop the disease if you inherit that one faulty copy.
Right.
That's a heavy burden to carry.
It is a heavy burden.
Yeah.
And the story of this discovery involves a remarkable woman named Nancy Wexler,
Nancy Wexler.
whose mother had Huntington's disease.
Oh, wow.
She knew she had a 50% chance of inheriting it, and she became obsessed with finding the gene.
Wow.
Her journey led her to Venezuela, to a region around Lake Maracaibo,
Okay.
where there was a large extended family with a tragically high incidence of Huntington's.
So she went right to the source, immersing herself in the lives of the families most affected by this disease to try and crack the code.
Yes, and her dedication and persistence were instrumental in finally pinpointing the Huntington's gene on chromosome 4.
So she found it.
She was a key part of the team that found it.
That's incredible.
It was a landmark achievement that's helped researchers understand the disease and develop potential treatments.
It's amazing how sometimes scientific breakthroughs are driven by such personal stories, by the passion and determination of individuals who are deeply affected by a disease.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that science is not just about cold, hard facts.
Right.
It's about human stories, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge to alleviate suffering.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
It's a reminder that even in the face of immense challenges, human ingenuity and resilience can shine through.
Okay, ready to turn to another page in the Book of Life.
Absolutely. Let's delve into chromosome 7.
Chromosome 7.
This chromosome houses a gene that's at the heart of a debate that's been raging for decades.
Ooh, which one?
The nature versus nurture debate.
Ah, the age-old question.
Yeah.
Are we products of our genes or our environment, or is it a bit of both?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And this particular gene on chromosome 7,
Okay.
which is involved in language development,
Language development.
provides a fascinating perspective on this debate.
Yeah.
Its story challenges the assumption that our brains are simply blank slates shaped solely by our experiences.
So are you saying we're born with a predisposition for language, a kind of genetic blueprint for communication?
That's exactly what the evidence suggests.
Wow.
There's a fascinating case study of a family often referred to as the K family,
The KE family.
who have a specific language impairment that's been traced back to a mutation in this gene on chromosome 7.
So this one family has provided crucial insights into the genetic underpinnings of language.
Yes.
How our genes might actually shape our ability to communicate.
Precisely. It's like a natural experiment
Oh,
that has helped us understand how genes can influence complex cognitive abilities.
okay.
And this ties into the work of a prominent linguist,
Okay.
Noam Chomsky,
Look.
who proposed the idea of an innate language faculty,
Interesting.
suggesting that we're not just learning language through imitation and reinforcement.
Right.
We have an inherent biological capacity for it.
So Chomsky was arguing that we're pre-wired for language, that our brains come equipped with certain grammatical structures that allow us to learn and use language in a way that no other species can. And now, decades later, genetics is providing evidence to support his theory.
It's a remarkable convergence of linguistics and genetics,
Yeah.
shedding light on one of the most defining characteristics of our species.
Okay.
our ability to communicate through language.
Okay, so maybe it's not a simple either. Maybe it's a bit of both nature and nurture working together to shape our language abilities.
That's a much more nuanced and accurate way of looking at it.
Okay.
Our genes provide the blueprint, the potential,
Right.
but our experiences, our environment play a crucial role in shaping how that potential is expressed. It's
Yeah.
a dynamic interplay between our innate predispositions and the world around us.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having all the ingredients for a cake,
Okay.
but needing the right recipe and baking conditions to create the perfect dessert.
I like that analogy.
Our genes provide the ingredients, but our environment and experiences are the chefs that determine how those ingredients come together to create the unique individual we are.
That's a delightful analogy, and it highlights the beauty and complexity of human development.
I'm curious about this interplay between genes and environment. Does that mean our behavior can actually influence our genes? Can our choices and actions change our genetic makeup?
That's a fantastic question, and it leads us to another fascinating chapter in the Book of Life,
Okay.
the realm of epigenetics.
Epigenetics. That
Yeah,
sounds
well.
intriguing. Is it like genetics' cooler, more mysterious cousin?
You could say that epigenetics refers to changes in gene expression that don't involve alterations to the underlying DNA sequence.
Okay.
It's like adding annotations or bookmarks to the book without changing the actual text.
Okay, that analogy is really helpful.
Good.
So it's not about changing the letters of the genetic code,
Right.
but more about how those letters are read and interpreted. It's like having the same script for a play, but different directors can interpret and stage it in completely different ways.
That's a brilliant analogy.
Thanks.
And here's where it gets really exciting.
Okay, I'm ready.
Factors like our environment, lifestyle choices, and even our thoughts and emotions
Right.
can influence these epigenetic changes.
So you're telling me that things like stress, diet, or even whether we're feeling happy or sad
Yes.
can actually switch genes on or off? That's like saying our minds can rewrite our genetic code.
In a way, yes.
That's incredible.
It highlights the incredible interconnectedness between our minds, our bodies, and our genes.
Okay.
And it has profound implications for how we understand the connection between our genes, our environment, and our health.
So give me an example.
For example, studies have shown that early childhood trauma
Oh, wow.
can leave epigenetic marks on our genes that can influence our stress response and even our mental health later in life.
Wow. That's both fascinating and a little bit scary.
It is powerful.
It's almost like our experiences can become biologically embedded in us, shaping our health and well-being for years to come.
It's a powerful reminder that our experiences matter not just on a psychological level, but on a biological level as well.
Okay.
And it challenges the traditional view of genes as fixed and unchanging.
Right.
They're much more dynamic and responsive to the world around us than we once thought.
This is blowing my mind. It seems like we're not just passive recipients of our genetic inheritance. We have a certain degree of agency in how our genes are expressed.
It's an empowering concept.
We're not just reading the book of life, we're also writing our own chapters through our choices and experiences.
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
Thank you.
It highlights the power we have to shape our own destinies, not just through our actions, but through the very expression of our genes.
This is truly empowering.
It is.
It means we're not just puppets of our DNA.
Right.
We have a say in how the genetic script unfolds, and it opens up so many possibilities for understanding how we can optimize our health and well-being through lifestyle choices and mindset shifts.
Absolutely.
This is a game changer.
It is a paradigm shift.
It means we have more control over our health and destiny than we ever imagined.
Precisely. And this concept of agency leads us to another fascinating chapter in the Book of Life.
Okay, what's next?
The X and Y chromosomes, the sex chromosomes.
Okay, now we're diving into the world of sex and gender.
Yes, we are.
What kind of stories do these chromosomes tell us about the biological and social complexities of being male or female?
The X and Y chromosomes are obviously involved in determining our biological sex, but their story goes far beyond that.
Okay.
They also play a role in a phenomenon known as sexual antagonism,
Sexual antagonism.
a kind of genetic tug-of-war between the sexes.
Sexual antagonism, that sounds intense. What exactly does that mean?
It refers to a situation where certain genes might actually benefit one sex at the expense of the other.
Oh, wow.
For example, genes on the X chromosome
Okay.
spend 2/3 of their time in females and only 1/3 of their time in males.
Right.
So they're more likely to evolve to benefit
Makes
females.
sense.
The Y chromosome, on the other hand, is only found in males.
Right.
So its genes are primarily concerned with male interests.
So you're saying that some genes might be playing for team female? Yes. While others are rooting for team male, it's like a genetic battle of the sexes.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Okay, I like it.
And this conflict can play out in various ways, from influencing physical traits to even affecting behavior.
Give me an example.
For example, some studies have shown that certain genes on the Y chromosome can make male fruit flies produce proteins that actually manipulate female behavior.
Manipulate female behavior. That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. What kind of manipulation are we talking about?
It's not mind control,
Okay.
but these manipulative genes can influence things like female mating preferences and even their lifespan.
Wow, that's incredible.
And these genes are thought to be favored by evolution
Okay.
because they increase the male's reproductive success,
Yeah.
even if it comes at a cost to the female.
Wow, so even at the genetic level, there's a kind of power struggle going on between the sexes. It's like a whole new dimension to the battle of the sexes.
And this genetic conflict isn't just limited to fruit flies.
Really?
There is evidence to suggest that it plays a role in human evolution as well.
Wow, okay.
It's a fascinating area of research, and it highlights the complex and sometimes surprising ways that our genes can influence our biology and behavior.
Definitely surprising. Okay, before we move on to another chapter, let's take a quick recap.
Okay.
We started with chromosome 3 and the gene that causes black urine,
Right.
then talked about the Huntington's disease gene on chromosome 4,
Mm-hmm.
the language gene on chromosome 7,
Yes.
and now we're exploring the X and Y chromosomes and this intriguing concept of sexual antagonism.
Right.
I'm starting to see how each chapter in this book of life reveals a whole new layer of complexity.
Exactly. The human genome is a vast and intricate tapestry, and we're only just beginning to unravel its secrets.
Well, I'm definitely hooked now. What other chapters are waiting to be explored? What other stories are hidden within the book of life?
Let's turn to chromosome 8,
Okay.
which is home to another type of genetic element that's been causing quite a stir-jumping genes.
Jumping genes. Okay, I'm officially intrigued. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
These jumping genes, also known as transposons,
Transposons.
are segments of DNA that can actually move around within the genome.
Hold on, you mean they can literally jump from one location to another like little genetic nomads wandering through our DNA?
Yes.
Whoa, that's mind-boggling. What's the purpose of these jumping genes? Are they just causing chaos in our DNA, or do they have a more important role?
For a long time, they were considered junk DNA with no real function.
Junk DNA.
But now we're starting to understand that they play a much more significant role than we initially thought.
So they're not just freeloaders hitching a ride in our DNA, they actually have a purpose.
Not at all. In fact, they can be quite influential. They can insert themselves into genes disrupting their function, which can sometimes lead to mutations and even diseases.
Oh, no.
But on the flip side,
Right.
they can also create new genetic variations,
Right.
which can drive evolution.
Like a double-edged sword. They can be troublemakers, but they can also be agents of change, driving the evolution of new traits and adaptations.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
It turns out that one type of jumping gene called an ALU element
ALU element.
is particularly abundant in the human genome. We have over 1 million copies of these ALU elements scattered throughout our DNA.
1 million copies. Why do we have so many of these jumping genes? Are they trying to take over our genome?
That's a great question, and scientists are still trying to figure out the answer.
Okay.
One theory is that they might have originated from ancient viruses that integrated themselves into our DNA.
What?
Another possibility is that they serve as a kind of genetic reservoir, providing raw material for evolution.
Wow, so these jumping genes might actually be remnants of ancient viral infections. That's a fascinating twist.
It is a bit mind-bending.
Yeah, it's like our DNA is a historical record carrying traces of these ancient encounters with viruses.
It is, isn't it? It shows how our evolutionary history is intertwined with the stories of viruses and other genetic elements that have shaped our genome over millions of years.
It's amazing to think about the long and winding road that led to our modern human genome. It's not just a static blueprint. It's a dynamic, evolving chronicle of our species' history, shaped by countless interactions with the environment, with viruses, and with other genetic elements.
Absolutely. And speaking of chronicles,
Okay.
let's move on to chromosome 9,
Chromosome 9.
which holds clues to our ancient past,
Okay.
to a time when our ancestors were migrating and spreading across the globe.
Ooh, a history lesson within a genetics lesson. I'm all ears.
What can our genes tell us about these ancient migrations?
I don't know, you tell me.
One of the most intriguing genes on chromosome 9
Okay.
is the one responsible for the ABO blood group system.
Oh, the ABO blood group.
You know, the classic blood types.
A, B, A, D, and O.
Exactly, the blood types that determine who we can donate to and receive blood from.
But what can these blood types tell us about our past? It seems like a pretty big leap from blood transfusions to ancient history.
It might seem like a leap,
Yeah.
but it turns out that the frequencies of these blood types vary dramatically across different populations around the world.
Okay.
And by tracing these patterns, scientists can reconstruct ancient migration routes and even infer how different human groups are related to one another.
So it's like a genetic map of human history, revealing the movements and connections of our ancestors across the globe. That's incredible.
Exactly. For example, the fact that Native Americans almost exclusively have type O blood
Really?
suggests that their ancestors likely migrated from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge relatively recently in evolutionary terms.
Fascinating. So by analyzing blood types, we can piece together the movements of ancient populations. It's like genetic archaeology.
Precisely. And the story of the ABO blood group system doesn't end there.
Okay, there's more.
It also reveals a fascinating interplay between our genes and the environment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does the environment come into play with blood types? Are we talking about things like climate and geography?
It's more about disease resistance.
Disease
It
resistance?
turns out that certain blood types are more resistant to specific diseases.
Oh,
For example, people with type O blood seem to have a higher resistance to cholera.
interesting. So the environment, in this case, the presence of certain diseases, can actually exert a selective pressure on certain blood types,
Exactly.
making some more advantageous than others. It's like a survival game, where those with the right blood type have a better chance of winning.
Exactly. And this interplay between genes and the environment is a recurring theme throughout the Book of Life.
Right.
It's a constant dance between our genetic inheritance and the forces that shape our world.
I'm starting to see that the genome isn't just about inheritance. It's about adaptation, survival, and the ongoing story of our species' interaction with the environment. It's like a historical record of our ancestors' triumphs and struggles as they navigated the challenges of life on Earth.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thank you.
And speaking of survival,
Yes.
let's move on to chromosome 10,
Chromosome 10.
which houses a gene that's deeply involved in our stress response,
Good.
a crucial factor in how we adapt to challenging situations.
Stress, everyone's favorite topic, right? But seriously, stress is a huge part of modern life.
It is a pervasive part of the human experience.
What can our genes tell us about how we cope with stress and the impact it has on our health?
The gene on chromosome 10 that we're going to explore is called CYP17,
CYP17.
and it's involved in the production of cortisol,
Cortisol.
a key hormone in our stress response system.
Cortisol, that's the fight or flight hormone, right? The one that kicks in when we face a threat or a challenge, preparing us to either confront the situation or run away.
Exactly when we encounter a stressful situation, our body releases cortisol, which mobilizes energy, sharpens our senses, and prepares us to deal with the threat. It's a primal survival mechanism that's been essential for our species' evolution.
So this gene on chromosome 10 is basically at the heart of how we react to stress, how we cope with the pressures and challenges of life.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is that this gene and the cortisol, it helps illustrate the complex interplay between our genes, our environment, and our behavior.
Okay, I'm always interested in how those three pieces of the puzzle fit together.
Mhm.
How does behavior come into play with our stress response system?
Well, it turns out that our thoughts, emotions, and actions can actually influence our cortisol levels.
Really?
For example, studies have shown that chronic stress,
Chronic stress.
like that from a demanding job or a difficult relationship,
Right.
can lead to chronically elevated cortisol levels, which can have negative impacts on our health.
So our environment and lifestyle choices can create a kind of feedback loop with our genes influencing how they're expressed and ultimately affecting our health and well-being. It's like a two-way street between our genes and our experiences.
Exactly. And this has implications for our health.
Like what?
Chronically elevated cortisol levels have been linked to a number of health problems,
Like what?
from weakened immune function to increased risk of cardiovascular disease.
Whoa. So our mental and emotional states can actually have a direct impact on our physical health through this cortisol pathway.
Yes, they can.
That's a powerful reminder of the mind-body connection and the importance of managing stress effectively.
It is, and here's where it gets even more interesting.
More interesting. Okay.
It turns out that this stress response system is also influenced by our perceptions and our social environment.
That perception.
For example, studies have shown that people who feel socially isolated or who lack a strong sense of belonging
Oh, wow.
tend to have higher cortisol levels.
So our social connections, our relationships, can actually buffer us against stress
Mhm.
and protect our health at a genetic level.
That's exactly what the evidence suggests.
That's amazing. It's like our genes are wired for connection, for belonging.
It highlights the profound interconnectedness between our biology, our psychology, and our social world.
This is truly fascinating.
Yeah.
It seems like our genes aren't just about our individual inheritance, they're also about our connections to others and our place in the larger web of life.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And speaking of interconnectedness,
Yeah.
let's move on to chromosome 11,
Chromosome 11.
which houses a gene that's at the heart of a debate that's been particularly contentious,
Ah.
the genetics of behavior.
Ooh. This is where things get really interesting and potentially controversial. I'm ready to dive into the deep end of the behavior gene pool.
Yeah.
And what gene are we talking about on chromosome 11?
The gene on chromosome 11 that we're going to explore is called D4DR,
D40R.
and it's involved in dopamine signaling in the brain.
Dopamine, that's the feel-good neurotransmitter, right? The one that's involved in our reward system, motivation, and pleasure.
You got it.
Okay.
Dopamine does play a crucial role in those areas.
I'm sensing a connection to things like addiction and thrill-seeking behavior.
You're on the right track, and variations in this D4DR gene have been linked to a personality trait known as novelty seeking.
Novelty seeking, that sounds like a fancy term for
Yeah.
people who like to try new things, who are drawn to adventure and excitement. I know a few people like that.
That's a good way to put it. Novelty seekers tend to be impulsive, adventurous, and easily bored.
Yeah.
They crave excitement and new experiences.
Yeah.
And studies have shown that people with a particular variant of the D4DR gene,
Okay.
often referred to as the long variant,
Long variant.
are more likely to score higher on novelty-seeking personality tests.
So you're saying there's a genetic component to our personality traits,
That's what the evidence suggests.
like our tendency to be adventurous or cautious, thrill-seeking or risk-averse. That's fascinating.
It's not a simple one-to-one relationship. Of course, our environment and experiences play a significant role as well.
Sure.
But this research suggests that our genes can influence our predispositions and tendencies.
This is a bit of a minefield, isn't it? Because if we start saying things like there's a gene for novelty-seeking, doesn't that imply that our behavior is predetermined, that we're just puppets of our DNA?
That's a valid concern, and it's where this debate gets tricky. It's crucial to emphasize that genes don't act in isolation.
Okay.
They interact with our environment in complex ways.
Right.
A gene might increase the likelihood of a certain trait, but it doesn't guarantee it.
Okay.
And even if someone has a genetic predisposition, their choices and experiences can still shape how that predisposition is expressed.
Okay, that makes sense. It's more about probabilities than predetermination.
Yeah.
It's not like our genes are dictating our every move. They're more like suggesting certain paths we might be more inclined to take,
Yeah.
but we still have the power to choose our own adventure.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the crucial concept of epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
The idea that our experiences can actually influence how our genes are expressed,
Yeah.
switching them on or off,
Right.
or even altering their activity levels.
So we're not just passive puppets of our genes.
No, we're not.
We have a certain degree of agency in how they're expressed.
Exactly.
Our choices and experiences can actually rewrite the genetic script, influencing how the story of our lives unfolds.
Precisely. And this understanding can be empowering.
Yeah, it is.
It means that even if we have a genetic predisposition for a certain trait, we're not necessarily stuck with it.
That's good to know.
We can make choices that influence how our genes are expressed, and those choices can shape our health, our behavior, and even our destiny.
This is a powerful message. It means that our genes aren't our destiny.
Right.
They're more like a starting point, a set of possibilities. And we have the power to influence how those possibilities unfold through our choices, our actions, and even our thoughts and beliefs.
Well said, and this concept of agency leads us to another fascinating chapter in the Book of Life.
Oh boy, what now?
The realm of free will.
Free will.
Okay, but before we dive into that philosophical deep end,
Yeah,
let's take a quick recap.
let's recap.
We started with chromosome 11 and the novelty-seeking gene.
Expert speaker. Welcome back to our deep dive into the human genome. Last time we left off with a big question.
Yeah, big one.
Does free will actually exist, or are we just playing out a genetic script?
It's a question that's puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries. And while genetics can offer clues about the biological factors that influence our behavior, It doesn't necessarily negate the concept of free will.
So even if our genes predispose us towards certain traits, we still have the power to make choices and chart our own course.
That's one way to look at it. The idea is that free will might be more nuanced than we traditionally think.
Yep.
Some scientists suggest that our brains make decisions before we're even consciously aware of them.
What?
Then our conscious mind creates a narrative around those decisions, giving us the feeling of being in control.
That's a bit mind-bending. So what I perceive as a conscious choice might actually be my brain playing catch-up, explaining a decision it's already made.
It's a fascinating concept to consider.
It is fascinating.
Think of it this way. Our brains are constantly processing an incredible amount of information making calculations based on factors we might not even realize. It's not entirely implausible that our conscious awareness of decision making lags behind a bit.
Okay, I'm starting to grasp the idea, but it still feels a bit like we're on autopilot if our brains are calling the shots. Where does that leave room for things like learning from our experiences or changing our behavior?
That's where the interplay between genes, environment, and behavior becomes really important. Remember epigenetics, how our experiences can actually alter gene expression.
Right, it's like adding notes to the genetic instruction manual, but without changing the original text itself.
Exactly. Our choices, our actions can influence how our genes are expressed. This means even if our brains are making decisions on a subconscious level, we still have the power to shape those decisions through what we do and the experiences we seek out.
That's reassuring. So even if there's some pre-programming going on, we still have the ability to influence how that programming plays out. It's like we're given a basic script, but we have the freedom to improvise and add our own flair.
That's a great way to think about it. It means that even if free will is an illusion, we're not completely powerless. Our choices still have the power to shape who we are and what we become.
So we're not just along for the ride, we're active participants in shaping our own destinies. Now moving on from this mind-blowing discussion of free will, what's the next chapter in our exploration of the Book of Life?
Let's turn to chromosome 12, which houses a remarkable set of genes that orchestrate the intricate dance of embryonic development.
From free will to fetal development, we're really covering a lot of ground. What's so special about the genes on chromosome 12?
These genes, often called homeobox or Hox genes, are like the master architects of the body. They determine the basic body plan, laying out the blueprint for where the head goes, where the limbs develop, and how the organs are arranged.
Wow, so these Hoxsey genes are basically writing the instruction manual for building a human being from a single fertilized egg. That's an incredible responsibility.
It is. They're like the software program that tells the cellular hardware how to assemble itself into a complex functioning organism.
That's mind-boggling. It seems like such an incredibly complex process going from a single cell to a fully formed human being, all guided by these Hox genes.
It is incredibly complex, but what's remarkable is that it unfolds with such precision. Imagine a cascade of instructions, each gene triggering the next, creating patterns and gradients that tell cells what to become and where to go.
So it's like an elaborate chain reaction with each gene setting off the next, ultimately creating this incredible symphony of development.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and what's even more remarkable is that these Hox genes aren't unique to humans.
Really?
They're found in a wide range of animals, from fruit flies to mice to elephants.
Hold on, are you saying that we share the same developmental genes as fruit fly?
Yes, the basic blueprint for building a body is surprisingly similar across many species. Of course, there are variations and modifications, which is why we don't look like giant fruit flies, but the fundamental principles are remarkably conserved.
It's incredible. It really drives home the interconnectedness of all life on Earth. It's like nature is using the same basic recipe book with slight variations for each species to create this incredible diversity of life.
Exactly, and this shared genetic heritage tells a powerful story about evolution. It suggests that we all descended from a common ancestor, and these Hox genes have been passed down through generations, shaping the diversity of life on Earth.
It really makes you appreciate the profound unity underlying all the apparent diversity of life. Okay, now I'm curious about another aspect of our shared human story, how we as a species spread across the globe. What can our genes tell us about human migration and the journeys of our ancestors?
That's a great question, and it leads us to chromosome 15, which houses a gene that's been particularly illuminating in tracing the footsteps of ancient human migrations.
I'm always fascinated by those stories of exploration and adaptation. What gene are we talking about on chromosome 15?
The gene on chromosome 15 we're going to explore is called MC1R, and it plays a key role in determining skin pigmentation.
Ah, so we're talking about melanin,
Yeah.
pigment that gives our skin its color, but what does skin color have to do with ancient migrations?
Variations in the MC1R gene have led to the remarkable diversity of skin tones we see across the globe. But it's not just about aesthetics. Skin pigmentation is actually an adaptation to different environments and levels of UV radiation.
Right. People living closer to the equator where the sun is more intense tend to have darker skins, which protects them from the harmful effects of UV radiation. And people living in regions with less sunlight tend to have lighter skin, allowing them to absorb more UV radiation and produce enough vitamin D.
Precisely, and by analyzing the variations in this MC1R gene across different populations, scientists can trace ancient migration patterns and gain insights into how our ancestors adapted to different environments as they spread across the globe.
So it's like a genetic record of our ancestors' journeys across the continents, how they adapted to different climates and environments as they explored new territories and made them their home.
That's a great way to put it, and what's fascinating is that these genetic studies often corroborate with archaeological and linguistic evidence, providing a multidimensional view of human history.
It's like piecing together a puzzle, using evidence from different fields to create a more complete picture of our shared past.
Exactly, and the story of the MC1R gene doesn't end there. It also highlights how cultural practices and societal values can influence the selection of certain traits. For example, in some cultures, lighter skin has been associated with higher social status, which may have led to selective pressures favoring individuals with lighter skin tones.
So our genes aren't just shaped by natural selection. They're also influenced by cultural factors, by how we perceive ourselves and others. It's a complex interplay of biology and culture.
That's a crucial point. It shows how our biology and our culture are intertwined, constantly shaping and influencing one another. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of genetics, the genetics of taste.
Okay, now we're talking. I'm always up for a discussion about food and flavor, but what does genetics have to do with our sense of taste?
It turns out that our genes play a significant role in how we perceive tastes, from sweet to salty to bitter, and these genetic variations can have a profound impact on our dietary choices and even our health.
So you're saying that some people might be genetically predisposed to love sweets, while others might have a natural aversion to bitter flavors that would explain why I can't resist chocolate while my best friend can't stand it?
That's exactly what the evidence suggests. And this can have implications for things like weight management and even disease risk, for example. People who are particularly sensitive to bitter tastes might be more likely to avoid certain vegetables, which could lead to nutritional deficiencies.
Wow, so our genes can influence our taste preferences, which in turn can affect our dietary choices and health outcomes. It's like a chain reaction from our DNA to our dinner plates.
Precisely. And this brings us to chromosome 16, which houses a gene that's been particularly intriguing in understanding the genetics of taste.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into the taste bud gene pool. What gene are we talking about on chromosome 16?
The gene on chromosome 16 that we're going to explore is called PTC, and it's responsible for our ability to taste a particular bitter compound called phenylthiocarbamide, or PTC for short.
Phenylthiol, what? No, that's a mouthful. Can we stick with PTC?
Yeah.
What's the story behind this gene and why is it important?
PTC is a synthetic compound, and the interesting thing is that some people find it intensely bitter, while others can't taste it at all. And this ability to taste PTC is determined by variations in the PTC gene.
So it's like some people are genetically super tasters while others are non-tasters when it comes to this PTC compound. Is it just a quirk of genetics or does it have any real-world implications?
It's not just a curiosity. It actually has implications for our dietary choices and even our health. PTC is similar in structure to certain compounds found in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and kale. And studies have shown that people who are particularly sensitive to PTC, the super tasters, tend to avoid these vegetables, which are known to have cancer protective properties.
So being a super taster might actually increase your risk of certain types of cancer because you're more likely to avoid these beneficial vegetables. That's ironic.
It is. It's a reminder that even our seemingly simple taste preferences can have complex connections to our health and well-being.
This is fascinating. This is another example of how our genes aren't just about inheritance. They're about our interaction with the environment, our choices, and the intricate web of factors that shape our lives.
Well said. And speaking of intricate webs, let's turn to chromosome 17, which houses a gene that plays a crucial role in a process that's essential for both life and death: apoptosis.
Apoptosis, that sounds a bit ominous. Is this where the book of life gets a bit dark?
Not necessarily. Apoptosis is essentially programmed cell death. It's a natural process by which cells self-destruct in a controlled and orderly manner.
So it's like cellular suicide. Why would cells want to kill themselves off?
It might seem counterintuitive, but it's actually a vital process for maintaining the health and balance of our bodies. Our bodies are constantly generating new cells, and if old or damaged cells didn't die off, we'd be overrun with them. Apoptosis ensures that those old, damaged, or potentially harmful cells are eliminated in a controlled way, preventing them from accumulating and causing problems.
So it's like a cellular cleanup crew, getting rid of the trash and keeping things tidy so that the body can function smoothly.
Exactly. And this process is especially important during embryonic development. Apoptosis helps sculpt and shape our bodies, eliminating unnecessary cells to create the intricate structures that make us who we are.
Wow. So apoptosis is like a sculptor chiseling away at the cellular clay to create a masterpiece. I never realized cell death could be so artistic.
It's a beautiful analogy, and the gene on chromosome 17 that we're going to explore, TP53, is a key player in this apoptotic process. It's often referred to as the guardian of the genome because it helps prevent cells from becoming cancerous.
Wait, so this TP53 gene is a tumor suppressor. It's like our internal cancer-fighting superhero.
You could say that it acts like a quality control checkpoint, monitoring cells for damage and triggering apoptosis if it detects abnormalities that could lead to cancer.
Wow, so this gene is basically patrolling our cells, looking for troublemakers, and eliminating them before they can cause chaos.
That's a great way to think about it. And what's fascinating is that mutations in this TP53 gene are incredibly common in cancer cells. In fact, it's estimated that over half of all human cancers involve a mutation in TP53.
So when this guardian gene is disabled, cancer cells can proliferate unchecked, wreaking havoc in the body.
That's precisely what happens, and this highlights the crucial role that apoptosis plays in maintaining the delicate balance between cell growth and cell death, a balance that's essential for life itself.
This is truly remarkable. It's like a constant battle between order and chaos playing out in our bodies, and this TP53 gene is right on the front lines defending us against cellular anarchy.
That's a powerful image. And speaking of battles, let's turn to chromosome 18, which houses a gene that's involved in a different kind of conflict, a genetic tug-of-war between parents and offspring.
Okay, I'm intrigued. A genetic battle between parents and children. That sounds like something out of a Greek myth.
Yeah.
What kind of conflict can there be at the genetic level between parents and their kids?
Well, it turns out that parents and offspring don't always have perfectly aligned interests when it comes to resource allocation from an evolutionary perspective. A parent's goal is to maximize their reproductive success by passing on their genes to as many offspring as possible, but for each individual offspring, the goal is to secure as many resources as possible from the parents to ensure their own survival and growth.
So it's like a competition for resources, a kind of genetic arms race between parents and their children, each vying for the best possible outcome for themselves.
That's a great analogy, and this conflict can play out in various ways, from influencing fetal growth to even affecting behavior after birth.
This is fascinating. I'm starting to see how evolution isn't just about survival of the fittest. It's also about these intricate conflicts and compromises between individuals and generations.
Precisely. And the gene on chromosome 18 that we're going to explore, IGF2, is a prime example of this parent-offspring conflict. It's a growth factor gene that's involved in fetal development.
So this IGF2 gene is basically telling the fetus to grow, 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 demanding as many resources as possible from the mother to fuel its development.
That's a good way to put it. And what's fascinating is that this gene is imprinted, meaning that it's expressed differently depending on whether it's inherited from the mother or the father.
Wait, are you saying that the same gene can behave differently depending on which parent it came from? That seems counterintuitive.
It is. And in the case of IGF2, the paternal copy of the gene is active, promoting fetal growth, while the maternal copy is silent.
Why would the maternal copy be silent? Wouldn't the mother want her offspring to grow as big and strong as possible? That seems like a disadvantage for the baby.
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of this parent-offspring conflict from the father's perspective. A bigger baby is generally a healthier baby, more likely to survive and reproduce. But for the mother, there's a trade-off. Investing too many resources in one offspring might come at the expense of her future reproductive potential. She has to balance the needs of the current offspring with her ability to have more children in the future.
So the mother's genes are essentially trying to rein in the growth of the fetus, making sure she doesn't invest too many resources in one baby at the expense of her future reproductive success.
Yeah.
It's like a delicate balancing act between the interests of the parents and the needs of the offspring.
Exactly, and this imprinted IGF2 gene is a fascinating example of how this conflict can play out at the genetic level, influencing the very size and development of the offspring.
This is truly mind-blowing. It's like a genetic tug-of-war with each parent's genes vying for control over the offspring's development. And this isn't just happening in humans, it's happening in countless other species as well, right?
Absolutely. This parent-offspring conflict is a fundamental aspect of evolution playing out across the tree of life, and it highlights the incredible complexity and nuance of the genetic mechanisms that shape life.
This is truly fascinating. Okay, before we move on to another chromosome, let's take a quick recap. We started with chromosome 17 and the apoptosis gene TP53, then explored chromosome 18 and the imprinted IGF-2 gene, which revealed this fascinating conflict between parents and offspring. It's amazing how much information is packed into each chapter of this book of life.
It truly is. The human genome is a vast and intricate tapestry woven with stories of survival adaptation and the ongoing dance between our genes and the world around us.
And speaking of stories, let's turn to chromosome 19, which houses a gene that's been particularly illuminating in understanding the genetics of memory and learning.
This gene APOE is best known for its role in cholesterol metabolism, but it's also been implicated in a number of cognitive functions, including memory and learning.
Wait, are you saying that a gene involved in cholesterol can also influence our brain power?
Yes, it turns out that APOE plays a role in transporting lipids, including cholesterol, throughout the body, and these lipids are essential components of brain cells and synapses, the connections between neurons.
Okay, that makes sense. Our brains need those fats to function properly.
Yeah.
But how does APOE relate to memory and learning specifically?
Well, studies have shown that certain variations in the APOE gene are associated with an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, a neurodegenerative disorder that affects memory and cognitive function.
So having a particular version of this APOE gene might make you more vulnerable to developing Alzheimer's later in life. That's concerning, but also potentially empowering. If we know our genetic risks, can we take steps to mitigate them?
That's a great question, and it's an area of active research. While we can't change our genes, we can make lifestyle choices that support brain health, such as staying mentally active, eating a healthy diet, and getting regular exercise. These lifestyle factors may help to reduce the risk of cognitive decline even in individuals with genetic predispositions.
That's encouraging. It means that even in the face of genetic risks, we still have the power to take proactive steps to protect our brains and preserve our cognitive function.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the crucial point that genes are not destiny. They provide a blueprint, a starting point, but our choices and experiences play a significant role in shaping how that blueprint is expressed.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not just passive passengers on the genetic roller coaster. We have some agency in how the ride unfolds now. Before we move on to another chromosome, let's take a quick recap. We started with chromosome 19 and the APOE gene, which highlighted the connection between cholesterol metabolism and cognitive function, including the risk of Alzheimer's disease.
That's a good summary, and this brings us to chromosome 20, which houses a gene that's been particularly fascinating in understanding the genetics of learning and memory, a topic we briefly touched on earlier with the APOE gene.
Okay, let's dive back into the brain power gene pool. What gene are we exploring on chromosome 20?
The gene on chromosome 20 that we're going to explore is called CEB, and it plays a key role in the formation of long-term memories.
Long-term memories, those are the ones we want to hold on to, right? The memories that shape our identities, our relationships, and our understanding of the world.
Exactly, and the CERB gene is a crucial player in the molecular processes that convert short-term memories into those lasting impressions that endure over time.
Okay, so how does this CRM gene work its magic? How does it transform fleeting memories into lasting impressions?
It's a complex process, but essentially when we learn something new, it triggers a cascade of molecular events in our brain cells. The CREB gene gets activated, and it produces a protein that acts like a switch, turning on other genes that are involved in strengthening synapses, the connections between neurons.
So it's like CREB is the conductor orchestrating this symphony of molecular activity that leads to the formation of long-term memories.
That's a beautiful analogy, and what's fascinating is that CR isn't just active in humans, it's found in a wide range of animals, from sea slugs to fruit flies.
Wait, are you saying that sea slugs and fruit flies can form long-term memories? Those seem like pretty simple creatures to have such complex cognitive abilities.
Yes, and studies on these simpler organisms have actually been instrumental in unraveling the molecular mechanisms of memory formation.
Wow, so even creatures with relatively simple nervous systems can learn and remember it. It's amazing how evolution has conserved these fundamental processes across such a diverse range of species.
It speaks to the fundamental importance of learning and memory for survival and adaptation. And this brings us back to the nature versus nurture debate. While our genes clearly play a role in our capacity for learning and memory, Our experiences are also crucial. The more we engage our brains, the more we learn and challenge ourselves, the stronger those synaptic connections become, and the more resilient our memories are likely to be.
So it's not just about our genetic inheritance. It's about actively using our brains and enriching our experiences to build those lasting memories that shape who we are.
Well said. And speaking of shaping who we are, let's turn to chromosome 21, which has a particularly poignant story to tell about the challenges and triumphs of living with genetic diversity.
Okay, I'm ready for another chapter in the Book of Life. What story does chromosome 21 have to share?
Chromosome 21 is perhaps best known for its association with Down syndrome, a genetic condition that results from having an extra copy of this chromosome.
Right, Down syndrome is one of the most common genetic conditions, and it's associated with a range of physical and intellectual challenges.
Yes, but it's important to emphasize that people with Down syndrome are individuals with unique strengths and abilities. And the story of chromosome 21 is not just about the challenges of this condition, it's also about the resilience, the love, and the contributions of people with Down syndrome and their families.
That's a beautiful message. It's a reminder that genetic diversity is part of what makes us human, and that every individual deserves respect and support, regardless of their genetic makeup.
Well said. And the research on chromosome 21 has actually led to incredible advancements in our understanding of human development and the potential for therapeutic interventions.
Okay, what kind of advancements are we talking about? Is there hope for treatments or even cures for Down syndrome?
For example, scientists have been able to create mouse models of Down syndrome, which allow them to study the specific genes on chromosome 21 that contribute to the various aspects of the condition. This research has led to the development of potential drug therapies that could target those genes and potentially alleviate some of the cognitive and developmental challenges associated with Down syndrome.
Wow, so we're starting to understand the specific genes that contribute to Down syndrome, and the knowledge is opening up new possibilities for therapeutic interventions. It's incredibly promising.
It is, and it highlights how genetic research can not only deepen our understanding of human diversity, but also lead to practical solutions that can improve the lives of individuals and families.
This is another powerful example of how genetics is moving beyond the realm of pure science and into the realm of medicine and personalized healthcare. It's not just about understanding our genes, it's about using that knowledge to improve lives.
Well said. And speaking of improving lives, let's turn to chromosome 22, which houses a gene that's been particularly fascinating in understanding the genetics of longevity, the quest for a longer, healthier lifespan.
Okay, now we're talking, everyone wants to know the secret to living a long and healthy life. What gene are we exploring on chromosome 22?
The gene on chromosome 22 that we're going to explore is called telomerase, and it plays a key role in maintaining the protective caps at the ends of our chromosomes known as telomeres.
Telomeres, those are like the eglets on the ends of shoelaces, right? They prevent the chromosomes from fraying and unraveling.
That's a great analogy. Telomeres are essential for protecting our chromosomes from damage and degradation. But every time a cell divides, its telomeres get a little bit shorter, and when telomeres get too short, cells can no longer divide properly, which contributes to aging and the development of age-related diseases.
So telomere length is like a cellular clock, ticking away with each cell division, bringing us closer to the inevitable end of our biological lifespan.
That's a good way to put it, and the telomerase gene produces an enzyme that can actually add length back to telomeres, essentially slowing down the cellular clock.
Wait, are you saying that telomerase can actually reverse aging at the cellular level? Is this the fountain of youth we've been searching for?
It's not quite that simple, but telomerase does play a role in maintaining the integrity of our chromosomes and preventing cellular senescence, the process of cells becoming old and dysfunctional.
Okay, so telomerase is like a maintenance crew for our cells, repairing the wear and tear on those telomere caps and keeping our cells functioning properly for longer.
That's a good way to think about it. And what's fascinating is that telomerase activity is particularly high in certain types of cells, like stem cells and cancer cells.
Stem cells, those are the cells that can differentiate into any other type of cell. The ultimate cellular blank slates, and cancer cells are notorious for their ability to divide uncontrollably, essentially achieving a kind of cellular immortality.
Exactly. And this high telomerase activity in these cell types is thought to contribute to their remarkable regenerative potential, and in the case of cancer cells, their ability to proliferate unchecked.
So telomerase is like a double-edged sword. It's essential for maintaining the health of our cells and tissues, but too much telomerase activity can be a bad thing, fueling the growth of tumors.
That's a great way to put it, and this highlights the delicate balance that our bodies must maintain to ensure both longevity and protection from disease.
It's incredible how these seemingly simple genetic mechanisms can have such profound implications for our health and lifespan.
And this brings us to the end of our exploration of the 22 autosomal chromosomes, the numbered chapters in the Book of Life. But we're not quite done yet. We still have one more chapter to explore, a chapter that's often shrouded in mystery and controversy, the sex chromosomes X and Y.
Okay, let's dive back into the X and Y chromosome saga. What stories do they have to tell about sex, gender, and the complexities of human identity?
The X and Y chromosomes are obviously involved in determining our biological sex, but their story goes far beyond that. They also play a role in a wide range of traits and conditions, from color blindness to hemophilia to certain types of mental illness.
Wow, so the sex chromosomes aren't just about determining whether we're male or female. They're involved in a whole host of other traits and conditions.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that the X and Y chromosomes have a unique evolutionary history. Unlike the other chromosomes, which come in pairs with one copy inherited from each parent, the X and Y chromosomes have evolved quite differently.
Okay, remind us about the basics of the X and Y chromosomes. Females have two X chromosomes while males have one X and one Y, but how did they end up so different?
Well, it's thought that the X and Y chromosomes evolved from a pair of ordinary chromosomes millions of years ago, but at some point a gene on one of those chromosomes mutated, becoming the sex-determining gene that we now know as SRY.
SRY, that's the gene that triggers the development of male characteristics, right?
Exactly. And once this SRY gene appeared, the chromosome it was on, which we now call the Y chromosome, began to evolve differently from its partner. The X chromosome, the Y chromosome, started shedding genes and shrinking in size, becoming specialized for male functions.
So it's like the Y chromosome went on a minimalist journey, shedding all the unnecessary extras and focusing on its core mission of making males. It's a lean, mean male-making machine.
That's a great analogy, and this evolutionary history has had some interesting consequences. For example, because the Y chromosome has so few genes compared to the X chromosome, males are more vulnerable to certain genetic conditions that are linked to genes on the X chromosome.
Right, because females have two copies of the X chromosome. They have a backup copy of those genes. If one copy is faulty, the other can often compensate. But males only have one X chromosome, so they're more susceptible to those X-linked disorders.
Exactly. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of the X and Y chromosomes, their role in sex differences beyond the obvious physical characteristics we're talking about, behavioral and cognitive differences between men and women.
Okay, so we're venturing into potentially controversial territory here. Is there a genetic basis for these differences?
That's a complex and often debated question. There's certainly evidence to suggest that genes on the X and Y chromosomes can influence certain behavioral and cognitive traits, but it's important to emphasize that these influences are often subtle and can be overridden by environmental and cultural
Right,
factors.
it's always a complex interplay between nature and nurture. Our genes might provide a nudge in a certain direction, but our experiences and environment ultimately shape who we become.
Exactly. And one of the most fascinating areas of research in this realm is the genetics of sexual orientation.
Ooh, this is a topic that's often surrounded by misinformation and prejudice. What does genetics have to say about sexual orientation? Is it something we're born with, or is it a choice?
There's been a lot of research on this topic, and while there's no single gay gene, there's growing evidence to suggest that genetics does play a role in sexual orientation, but it's not a simple on-off switch. It's a complex interplay of multiple genes and environmental factors that contribute to who we are attracted to.
So it's not a choice, but rather a complex interplay of nature and nurture, just like many other aspects of our personality and identity.
Exactly, and this understanding is crucial for challenging the harmful notion that sexual orientation is a choice. The evidence suggests that it's a fundamental aspect of who we are, shaped by both our genes and our experiences.
This is a powerful message. It's a reminder that diversity is a natural part of the human experience, and that every individual deserves to live authentically free from prejudice and discrimination.
Well said, and this brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Book of Life, a journey that's taken us from the origins of life itself to the intricacies of human identity and the ethical dilemmas of genetic knowledge.
It's been an incredible journey. I
Yeah.
feel like I've learned so much about myself and the world around me. But I have to admit, all this talk about genes and destiny has left me wondering, if our genes influence so much about who we are, do we really have free will?
That's a huge question.
It really is, and it's one that I've been grappling with as we've gone through all this material. We've talked about how genes influence so many things about who we are, our physical traits, our health, our behaviors, even our personalities.
Right.
What about the things that make us uniquely human?
Yeah.
The qualities that go beyond just basic biology, like creativity and compassion or sense of self.
That's a profound question, and it takes us to a realm that's both fascinating and incredibly challenging to explore the genetics of consciousness.
Consciousness, it feels like that's the holy grail of neuroscience, like trying to understand what it means to be aware, to experience the world subjectively, to have this sense of I that feels separate from everything else.
It is one of the greatest mysteries of human existence.
Yeah.
And while we're still far from a complete understanding of consciousness, there are some intriguing clues emerging from the field of genetics.
Okay, you've got my attention. What kind of genetic clues are we talking about? Is there a consciousness gene hidden somewhere in our DNA?
It's not quite that simple,
Okay.
but there is research on a gene called HR1,
HAR1.
which is highly active in the human brain,
Okay.
particularly during fetal development. And what's fascinating is that this gene shows remarkable evolutionary acceleration in humans
Uh-huh.
compared to other primates.
So this HAR1 gene might be one of the genetic factors that contributed to the development of our uniquely human cognitive abilities, the things that set us apart from our primate cousins
Yeah,
and allowed us to develop language and create art and build civilizations.
that's one possibility. It highlights how even subtle genetic changes can have a profound impact on our evolution
Yeah.
and the development of our incredibly complex brains.
It really is awe-inspiring to think about the vast evolutionary journey that led to the human brain, capable of all these incredible feats of creativity and ingenuity
I
and
don't
abstract thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while genetics can provide insights into the biological underpinnings of these abilities,
Right.
it doesn't diminish their wonder and complexity.
Right. It's not about reducing these amazing human qualities to just like simple genetic explanations. It's about appreciating that interplay between our genes and our experiences and the mysteries of consciousness that
Yeah.
make each of us unique.
Well said. And as we conclude our deep dive into the Book of Life, it's important to remember that this is an ongoing story.
It is.
With each new discovery,
Yeah.
each new insight, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the incredible tapestry of life on Earth.
It's been an incredible journey.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on what it means to be human, to be a part of this grand evolutionary experiment that's been unfolding for billions of years.
It's truly humbling, isn't it?
It is.
And as we continue to explore the frontiers of genetics, we're likely to encounter even more mind-blowing discoveries and ethical challenges. It's an exciting and humbling time to be alive, witnessing the unraveling of these profound mysteries.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that we're all connected, not just through our shared humanity,
Right.
but through the very fabric of life itself, woven together by these intricate strands of DNA.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And as we close the book on this deep dive, I encourage you to keep exploring, to keep questioning, and to embrace the wonder and complexity of this remarkable journey we call life.
It's been a truly enlightening experience, and I can't wait to see what future deep dives hold. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing. And remember, if you have a stack of sources you'd like us to dive into, we're always up for a new adventure. Just send them our way.